The sheet music is not the music itself. The script is not the movie. The contract is not the relationship. Writing about the sunset is not the sunset itself. And so there's a difference between the abstraction, the analytical take, and the experience of the thing. Good morning, everybody. It is 24 degrees out and windy, but I'm going for a walk because I got some stuff I want to talk about. So we'll see how long this lasts. My face gets red. It's because I'm cold. So I've been writing a lot about some really nerdy stuff. What is consciousness? Because in the world of AI, everybody's wondering, what happens if AI turns conscious? I just watched the Joe Rogan podcast with the head of NVIDIA. I forget his name, but they were talking about whether this thing could be conscious because everybody's worried about it. And the guy who leads NVIDIA was like, I don't think so. It's unlikely. But then they tried to define what consciousness was, and they couldn't. They didn't know what they were talking about. So I thought that was interesting because the people who are leading the AI race don't even know what consciousness is. And maybe that's why they're not worried about it. But it got me thinking, because I've been writing about this kind of stuff anyway. What is it? You hear people talk about expanding your consciousness, being enlightened, expanding your awareness. When you learn something from somebody, you'll be like, thank you for enlightening me. People who are the smartest, most wisdom-filled people around, the ones with the coolest perspective, they are considered enlightened. And then you can think of it like when somebody gets knocked out, they lose consciousness, right? Let's say that your friend's upset with you, and he's like, you weren't paying attention to me, you didn't know that I was struggling, and you would say something like, well, I wasn't aware that was going on, otherwise I would have. I wasn't conscious of it. And so there seems to be this correlation between being aware of something and consciousness. Now here's where it gets a little dicey. My mic just fell. Here's where it gets a little dicey, right? You could say that, but that means that consciousness isn't like a static thing. It's not still. It means it expands, which means that somebody could be more conscious than the other person, which is why I wasn't conscious of it, and now I am. And so that means it's expanding, and maybe that's what learning is. So then you could say, okay, well, maybe consciousness is in the knowing. And then you got to get into well, how do you learn? And so this is a lot about what I've been thinking about. Let's say you get dropped on Earth. Look at that looks cool. Let's say you get dropped on Earth. You're brand new baby, right? You don't know anything. You're brand new. You got nothing. No context. And then you start walking, or you don't start walking. You start moving around. You start feeling the carpet. You start feeling the walls. You know what mom is like a little bit, but it's all from your sensory, your feeling, touching, taste, eyes, hearing, smelling, all of that stuff, your five senses. And what happens is the sensory input is observed and then abstracted. And so let's say you smell something. It comes in through the nose. You observe it up here, and you extract that into an abstraction, and now it's a concept in your head. For example, you could say there is an idea or a concept of hot and cold, and you understand this. But the only reason that you know something is hot or cold is because you felt what hotness or coldness is. And so the concept of hotness and coldness is not the same thing as the experience of hotness and coldness. That looks so freaking cool. And so, for example, the sunset, you know what a sunset is conceptually, but it's different than experiencing one. They're not the same thing. So the abstraction is not the same thing as the experience. And so you have this duality between sensory input and then the abstraction process. But then once you've abstracted something, you have the concept of it, then you see the world that way. You know, if I think that the sun is going to be hot, I'm going to see the world in a way that assumes that the sun's going to be hot. And so, like, this is the idea of seeing is believing, and then believing is seeing, because the things that you learn compound on themselves. Compound interest works in all facets, right? You have layers to your perception. So you drop in baseline, you know nothing, but you're conscious, at least enough to where you can take in perception. And then you start to slowly compound. It goes sensory input, abstraction, sensory input, abstraction, and each time it's building a new layer to what you understand. And so then I started to think, okay, well, maybe consciousness is perception itself, which means that ChatGPT could, to some extent, be conscious. But that doesn't quite fit the bill either, because ChatGPT can't smell, it can't taste, it can't touch, it can't hear, and it can't see. It's just data entry, right? It's not like it's got eyes. It's just code. And so even if perception was consciousness, it still has like a limited functionality. Because again, it's like the difference between reading about the knowledge or the concept of the sunset. It's not the same thing as actually experiencing it, obviously. So ChatGPT would have like a black and white version of life, even if it was conscious. But then you could say, like, okay, well, let's say the human level of perception is something that ChatGPT can perceive one day. Does perception equal consciousness? And I still think it's no, because if I can perceive all of this input and gather it, that doesn't mean that I've experienced it, right? To experience something is to be like know the experience itself. So if I'm gathering information, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm paying attention to it or that I'm able to see it. The experience part of things seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be unique to humans. And the reason that I think this is because if you were to go, okay, let me put it this way. Sensory input creates the abstraction. Abstraction is of the mind. And then you'll notice that there's a lot of really smart people that they don't necessarily become wise, and you wonder why. They can spit off all this jargon and they know the textbooks, but you wouldn't consider them wise. And it's because there's a difference between head knowledge and heart knowledge. If you've spent any time in Christianity, you'll know that there are people who talk about Jesus all the time, conceptually. They know the verses up and down. But if you were to look at their life, they don't act like Jesus. And so that's confusing because they talk about it all the time. It's because there's a difference between head knowledge and heart knowledge. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is the difference between knowing something and knowing something, between knowledge and understanding, is the experiential aspect of it. That's what I think anyway. That's so cool. So like, for instance, you can talk about trusting the Lord and, you know, He'll take care of your needs. But what happens when you get so sick that you can't get out of bed? You going to trust Him then? You could say that the experience of going through that and actually having to use the muscle of trusting God would give you a deeper layer of consciousness, deep layer of understanding. Something that you could feel. It's different. You've actually gone through it. It's an experience. It's not just conceptual. It's not just an abstraction. You've actually gone through it. You had to walk through the adventure of it. And so, do you understand it more so than the guy who didn't? I would say yes, because you experienced it. You didn't just look at the blueprint, you know? The sheet music is not the music itself. The script is not the movie. The contract is not the relationship. Writing about the sunset is not the sunset itself. And so there's a difference between the abstraction, the analytical take, and the experience of the thing. And so where do we go with that? To be honest with you, I think it works both ways. I think, well, this is kind of cool. I think the heart and the mind work with each other, but they correct each other. And what I mean is, the heart experiences and the mind conceptualizes, and they refine each other. So you experience something, and then you abstract it, and it becomes conceptual, and then the concept feeds back into the next experience, and that's what we call learning. And so the heart will tell, like when someone gets really passionate, it just oozes out of them. Like they find the words, and that's because the mind's job is to communicate what the heart is. So the Bible says that everything flows from the heart, right? And so when you are passionate about something or you believe in something, you can find the words easily. More so than like if someone gets upset, they start complaining about their boss, and it's like, dude, you've been complaining for an hour. You're just saying the same things over and over again, but in different ways. It's like, yeah, because they're passionate about it. The mind finds the rationalizations. And that's why you see a lot of people who make really, really freaking good arguments for stuff that you know is wrong. It's like the rationalization is a skill. You can work your brain out, make good arguments, but if it's founded on the wrong heart, you're going to get really good arguments for all the wrong things. And it's because the brain rationalizes desire. It rationalizes what you want. And so then you could say, well, how do you correct the heart? Well, Jesus, for one, obviously, he'll transform you. But the mind itself is a good accuracy tool. You know, if you write your thoughts down, you pour your heart out onto a page, then you can look at it with your mind as from an analytical standpoint. And you'd be like, oh, that's not right. That's not right. I didn't realize I thought this way. And so you can use the mind to correct the heart, but you can use the heart to correct the mind as well. And so, again, another positive feedback loop with compound interest. So, where do we go from here? What am I saying? What I'm saying is I think there's a difference between conceptual perception, the abstraction, the analytics, the metrics, the blueprint, and the experience of the thing itself. I think if I were to sum up consciousness as to what I think and understand right now, I think there's a difference between chronological life, years, time lived, and experiential life. So for instance, when someone walks, let me put it this way. You got a musician and a non-musician. A non-musician listens to the song, he loves the song, probably plays it a couple more times. He's like, man, this is a dope song. Then you have somebody who's a musician. They don't just love the song. They love the song, but they also think about the artist, where they came from, how they've picked up all their skills, how their career went, how their music has evolved over time. You think about the instruments, their own personal practice with those instruments, and he's comparing to the way that this guy plays the instruments compared to how everybody else plays the instruments, how the instruments add layers to each other, the production, like the evolution of music entirely, the evolution of music just in their personal life. And so like the amount that is seen inside of the song is dependent on the amount that is explored through experience. And of course that's the case, because if you spend more time doing something, you're going to have more experience in it, which means you can extract more layers out of it. That's why poets can see into deeper layers of reality. It's because they've spent time looking at it. And so the whole idea of consciousness, I think, is an experience. And since machines can't experience, I don't think that they can become conscious. And this is maybe a hot take, but I'm under the assumption that God breathed life into everything. And so whatever gets somebody from 0 to 1 is up to God. But he creates things in a way that can compound. And so you think of like cells are alive, plants are alive, animals are alive, and humans are alive. And each one has a deeper, each different layer of consciousness, experientially. Like the cell is different from the plant is different from the animal is different from the humans. animals are not as smart as humans. So their layer of experience is gonna be different. They're not gonna be able to read poetry and understand that, whatever that layer is, right? And so you could say that if a monkey took shrooms and expanded its consciousness, it could become a human. I've heard that argument before. Okay, maybe. I don't think so, but maybe. But even then, that would just prove my point even more, which is like, there's a different layer of expansion of reality that you could move your consciousness into, but it's based on experience. And so I think that's God breathed. I think that the fact that anything could be alive at all is because of God, and He puts us into a body that fits our purpose. And so my purpose needed a human body, and so that's what my consciousness is. It fit in. And since I have a brain, I can have a multi-layered expansion of beliefs, and I can experience the world in different ways than something like a dog could. And so what do I think conscious is? I think conscious is experience. And I think experience is something that only things that are alive can do in varying degrees. And I also don't think that humans can bring life. I think God breathes life into things. And so if we were to sum all that up, because I know I've been rambling about deep philosophical jargon for a while, can ChatGPT or AI become conscious? And it's like, no, I don't think so. I think it can mimic consciousness, because it has the brain, so it can abstract, but I don't think it's aware of itself. I don't think it knows what it's doing. I think it's just computing. It's like the difference between running around and like a moving body, someone who's blacked out drunk, versus like noticing that you exist for the first time. I don't think that threshold is crossable without God. I think God ordains that. And so, no, I don't think ChatGPT will ever become conscious. I think it'll mimic it. I think it'll recognize patterns based off of algorithms that it's given, but it's not aware that it's doing it. It's just following its programming. And so it'll sound and look and maybe even feel like it, but it's not like there's a brain behind it. Now, I will say this is, I could continue to talk about this forever, but whoever wrote the algorithm has a spirit behind it. So whether that's a collection of people or just one person, however that works, the fact that there's an algorithm in the first place means that there's a programmer, and a programmer does have a spirit, and so it can mimic the values and beliefs of whatever the programmer is. And so it could be an extension of them, a really powerful tool that can either build a house or tear it down, and in this case, the entire world. And so it is a little scary, but I don't think AI itself could be conscious. I think that is God-given. Maybe God will give it to it, but I doubt it. I really doubt it. Okay, I know that was really nerdy, and they'll probably keep popping out, so